أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرفهم أجمعين حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من يومنا هذا إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي وقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم إن لقتل الحسين حرارة في قلوب المؤمنين لن تبرد أبدا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Dear mu'mineen wa mu'minat, brothers and sisters, mourners and lovers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are grateful for this opportunity that we have received once again tonight to gather, to discuss, to reflect and ponder over issues of great importance and gravity. The chief and master of the martyrs, Syed al-Shuhada, Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wassalam, has been guiding us and directing us and those who came before us for the last 1400 years towards very lofty goals, He has been guiding us and inspiring us to gather year after year, generation after generation, to pitch this tent of Azza, to commemorate his sacrifice and the sacrifices of his family and followers, and thus to play our part, to play a small part in this large and lofty civilizational mission of Islah-e Ummat by seeking our own Islah and of course the Islah of other parts of the Ummat through this process. Like all other martyrs, his power to influence events in this ordinary material world, his power and influence have continued after his death and martyrdom. And of course, he is the chief of the martyrs. So the extent of his influence and power is of a different order altogether. Imam Hussain is the one who is able to gather us together to form communities that would otherwise never be formed. I've mentioned this before and I would like to emphasize it again. It is truly a pleasure to be here in Singapore where a community has been forged with so much diversity in it. You may have seen other places, I have too, where communities are not able to retain this amount of diversity as we see here. We have a large Malay component, for example, in this community, a large component from India, from Pakistan, from a few other countries as well. People with different professions, different backgrounds. It really is a pleasing sight to see this because it sets an example for other places to follow. And Imam Hussain is the one who is able to achieve this. Otherwise, I don't think those of us who are gathered here today and gather together every night would have been able to achieve this success if it were not for Imam Hussein's inspiration and guidance. It is our desire to connect with Imam Hussein that has led to this extraordinary phenomenon that we see here. And of course, a lot of effort has gone into this. The Ustad is present here, others are present here. Special efforts have been made to ensure success in this regard, all of them seeking to emulate the example set by Imam Hussein, inspired by the movement of Imam Hussein. Imam Hussein also raises us up from the mundane, everyday level of existence that our lives often slip into. A lot of us can probably agree with this statement that if it were not for the light of Karbala in our lives would be a rigmarole. Get up in the morning, get ready, go to school, go to work, go to this meeting, go to that customer, pursue this target, worry about the next promotion, worry about getting laid off and retrenched. If we are successful by this, by that, man has his needs. Fulfill these needs, and they are valid and legitimate needs. They must be fulfilled, and we must try. But those who've gone down this path know very well that very soon they come to a point where it seems like they are running on a treadmill. We bought this, all right. Now what? Okay, we buy that. Now what? We've seen this place, great. Now what? The mundane, the earthly, if we are not careful, if we are not able to ensure the light of Imam Hussein in our lives, the darkness of the mundane begins to overpower us. And that, those who have been there and sensed it, know how terrible a situation that is. Imam Hussein gives us a higher purpose. He tells us that no matter what our profession is, he tells us that even if we don't have a profession, many of us, many of those present here, they perform important duties in their families and their households, particularly some of the ladies who are here. There are kids who are studying, they're not working. Imam Hussein offers us a template, he offers us a model of inspiration and direction, no matter who we are, where we come from, and what we are doing. We spoke about some of these things yesterday. Seeking to establish and spread purity, virtue, goodness, justice, brotherhood, love, unity, knowledge, and to encounter all sorts of evil, disunity, cruelty, selfishness, excessive individualism, fighting over small little material proceeds. Imam Hussein has something. Imam Hussein and his family and his followers, they have something for each and every one of us, which allows us to give meaning to our lives. And this perhaps is one of the reasons and one of the secrets for why the tent of Azah is pitched no matter what, no matter where. This community here has gone through a period where it was looking for a location to conduct its programs. Did the tent of Azah ever not get pitched? I narrated on the first night about a brother, a Momin, who was the only Shia for hundreds of kilometers around. And we saw there too that the tent of Azah was pitched during these times. Dear brothers and sisters, this extraordinary phenomenon that we see today, we see all around us, it has an extraordinary impact on all of us. And when I say all of us, it's not just us Shia. We Muslims are divided into various groups. All of us, Muslims, the world's Muslim ummah is divided into various groups, crisscrossed by various lines. Of course, there is the famous division of Shia and Sunni. But even within the Sunni community and the Shia community, there are several other lines that can be drawn as well, based on language perhaps, on nationality perhaps. Subsects within the Sunnis, for example, you have the 4 famous sects related to fiqh, the Shafi'i, the Maliki, the Hanbali, the Hanafi, for example. There are news reformist schools where I come from. There is the famous and the important reformist school of Deoband. So you have a number of Sunnis who are associated with this reformist school of thought. They themselves get divided into Hayati, Mamati, for example, and so on and so forth. You have the Barelvis, you have, and this is just one country or one part of the world. We are crisscrossed by innumerable lines. And each of these parts of the Muslim Ummah, each of them have a role to play. Each of them have a respectable position in the Ummah. But one of the services, one of the important services that Imam Hussain has provided to us, the Ummah that he seeks to reform, is that amidst all these crisscrossing lines in the Muslim Ummah, Imam Hussain has drawn one very clear line into the sand. There are a lot of people, a large part of the Muslim world, the majority of Muslims, they have no problem being labeled as Sunni. They are proud of it. Just as those who are Shia have no problem being called Shia. Among the Sunni and the Shia, the various subsects, if you address them by their names, their title, the name of their sect, nobody has a problem with that. Many of them are proud of whatever titles they have. But Karbala has one major achievement to its credit. Not a single Muslim is willing to be associated with Yazid.
Muhammad wa ala Muhammad salawat.
Allahumma salli ala
Muhammad and wa ala Muhammad wajjal for him. May I please request everyone to please move forward kindly. Jazakallah.
Please recite a salawat as you come forward.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad and wa ala. Especially those at the back, please kindly move forward because we need more space at the back. As Muslimat need more space as well. Please kindly move in front. Yes, if you can please move in front. Those at the back, brothers at the back, especially please, if you may move forward, please. Especially those near the yellow barrier. Thank you. Also, the Muslimat need some view to look at the projector as well. Shukran Muhammad wa ala Muhammad salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad and wa ala Muhammad. Thank you, Aga. Thank you.
In Karbala, both sides were apparently Muslim. On both sides, you had those who prayed. On both sides, you had those who had memorized large parts of the Quran or perhaps the entire Quran as well. Both sides claimed to be following the teachings of Rasulullah. But the events of those few hours of Ashura have led to such a line being drawn within us that no Muslim is willing to be associated with Yazid, and each and every Muslim would give an arm to be associated with Hussein. Would give an arm to be associated with Hussein. This is no small achievement, dear brothers and sisters, because of and this is one of those points that help us understand the immense potential that Hussainism and Karbala have for reforming the Ummah, for taking the Ummah forward to those lofty goals, some of which we have spoken about. It's not limited to us either. Hussein and Karbala have an enormous impact on non-Muslims as well. And I'm sure you are aware of various examples. I'll just give a brief example and move ahead. This impact on non-Muslims, dear brothers and sisters, is not something new. It began in the lifetime of Hussein himself. Many of you have heard the name of one of the martyrs of Karbala called Wahab al-Kalbi. Wahab al-Kalbi is famously known as the Christian martyr of Karbala. Of course, he wasn't a Christian when he was martyred, but he was a Christian till a few days ago, till a few days prior to his martyrdom. And it is Hussein's character and his personality that brought about this enormous transformation in him. And as far as we know, dear brothers and sisters, and here I would like to emphasize this, what sets Hussainism apart. We don't have any record of Imam Hussein engaging in a theological debate with Wahab, telling him, for example, that, look, this is our proof of the unity of God. This is the proof of the prophethood of our Rasul, and your claims are weak for the following reasons. We don't have any record of him engaging in this kind of a debate to draw him in. The picture that emerges for us is, it was with the amazing, charismatic strength of his character that he was able to draw him. He spoke to Wahab's fitra, human nature, that which is found in each and every human being, no matter what religion he belongs to. The core of every human being that finds itself irresistibly drawn towards goodness, towards piety, virtue, purity, sacrifice, bravery, all those human values. Wahab was able to see these values not just reflected, but brilliantly shining forth in Hussein's character and in his followers. And this points us to and opens new vistas for us as we try to take the Husseini movement forward in our own lives. Imam Hussein takes care of a lot of our needs. We Shia, like most other Muslims in the world, we are the people of Tawassul. We are the people of Tawassul. We ask from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the Masumin alayhimus salam. We ask from the Masumin alayhimus salam, and we see no contradiction in asking from them for all our problems and between asking from Allah. We are proudly the people of Tawassul, like most of the Ummah is as well. And here let me narrate a couple of heartwarming incidents in this regard. Over the previous nights, we've been speaking mostly about history pertaining to 1400 years ago. Tonight, let's have a few incidents which mostly pertain to more recent and more contemporary times. Please recite a salawat by Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. About 120 years ago, when Iraq was still a British colony, as you know, brothers and sisters, Iraq used to be ruled by the Ottoman Empire with its capital in Istanbul. But then, like many other parts of the world, it became a part of the British Empire. Certain provinces from the Ottoman Empire were taken over by the British, and these mostly constitute today's Iraq. Iraq was ruled by the British during those times. The city of Samarra was struck by the plague, Ta'un, terrible disease that used to ravage across lands in earlier times, killing multitudes, millions, wiping out entire civilizations. The city of Samarra in the north of Iraq was struck by the plague. By the way, as an aside about Samarra, Samarra is the city where those of you who have been on Ziyarah, you'll have visited Samarra. It is the city where our 10th and 11th Imams are buried. Their shrine, their mausoleum is in Samarra. It is also the city, the location where our Imams, our 12th Imams, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, Hazrat Hujjat ibn al-Hasan, ghaibah, his occultation, it began from there. That's where he was born, that's where he lived, and when his father was martyred, his occultation began from there. So Samara is a city that is well known to us. But as an aside, interestingly, Samara was a city that always had an anti-Ahl Bayt orientation. It's quite interesting history about Samara. It was established in the second phase of the Bani al-Abbas rule. As you know, brothers and sisters, after the Bani Umayyah captured power, they were overthrown about 90 years after capturing power. They were overthrown by a popular revolution led by the Bani al-Abbas tribe or clan. And they established their rule. The Bani al-Abbas rule can be divided into two phases. Their earlier phase is a phase where they claim a lot of the merits of the Shia and Alawi movement. They claimed, when they were leading this revolution and rebellion, they claimed to be leading it on behalf of the family of the Prophet. And after they acquired power, they said, we are the family. They said those narrations and ahadiths related to imama, they pertain to us. And they put on this geste of being Shia in some limited and deviated form. And this continued and in some ways reached a peak with Ma'mun al-Abbasi, the person, the ruler responsible for the martyrdom of the 8th and the 9th Imams. But after that, this is the first phase, where there is a pretense of being Shia or the adoption of many Shia slogans and symbols and attitudes, mostly to fool the masses. But after Ma'mun, the second phase begins, where Bani al-Abbas flips completely. And they adopt an openly anti-Ahl Bayt position. An anti-Ahl Bayt position. And this continues for a few more years and decades till they finally fade into weakness. Samarra is a city that has been established in this second phase. And Samarra is a city where our 10th and 11th Imams were imprisoned and martyred as well. So in the city of Samarra about 120 years ago, it was struck by the plague. And during that time, as I said, Imam Hussein solves a lot of our problems, meets a lot of our material or answers a lot of our material needs and questions and requests as well. During this time, that was a time when there was still no vaccination or any effective treatment. And people were dying in multitudes. There was a small community of the followers of the Ahl Bayt in Samarra, particularly around the shrine area. And during that time, this incident is narrated by the alim who later on founded the Hawza of Qum, and we'll speak about Qum in a few minutes as well. He says that we were gathered there with students of the small little madrasa or Hawza that used to exist in Samarra, and we were worried because people were dropping around us like flies. And we were taking medicine, we were of course going to doctors, etc., but it just wasn't working. At that time, we met one of the scholars who used to live there in Samarra. His name was Mirza Muhammad Taqi Shirazi. Mirza Muhammad Taqi Shirazi is an interesting figure. He is the person who led the popular revolt and uprising against British rule in the year 1920 in Iraq, which is famous as Thawratul Ashreen, the revolt or revolution of 1920. He was the primary leader of that. But unfortunately, this revolt, this armed rebellion was not successful. Anyway, this event is a couple of decades prior to that. Mirza Muhammad Taqi Shirazi says that if I offer you a solution or a suggestion, will all of you agree to follow it? And we said yes. He said, what you need to do, each of you, is to recite Ziyarat Ashura. Ziyarat Ashura for 10 days in a row with sincerity and offer the sawab of this ziyarah to the mother of our Imam, Hazrat Narjis Khatun. So all of us did this, and suddenly among our households, those of us who were performing this, suddenly the number of ill, the diseased, and the dying started to decline rapidly. Of course, we continued to seek treatment as well, which is an important lesson for us as well. When we talk of tawassul, when we talk about these special prayers, in no way is this meant to imply that we should not seek ordinary recourses or solutions or remedies to our problems. It is about combining them, and it is about knowing and being aware of the fact that the real solution to our problems and the source of all our solutions lies somewhere else. So they continue to refer to these doctors, and the same medicine was working in their households but not working in other households to the same extent. And then as word spread, all of the city joined in together, and we used to recite Ziyarat Ashura together, the Shia and the Sunni, and the city in this way was able to survive, and a lot of people recovered from this illness. This focus, this awareness, because I said that it's important to keep in mind that it's not just these acts of tawassul, but the focus and awareness which is important. This we can see in another incident, once again from contemporary times. This one is only about 40 years ago. And this one is from the city of Qom, the city in which I am privileged to live during this part of my life. The city of Qom, as you know, is today the center of Islamic knowledge in the world. It is associated in particular with the Shia, and of course it is no doubt a center of Shia knowledge. But those who know about these things know that it is the primary center of Islamic knowledge in the world, because no other city in the Shia or Sunni parts of the world can compare with Qom with regards to the number of students, the quality of education that is available there. So it is at this time the world's leading city for Islamic knowledge, and we Shia are proud that this privilege has been bestowed upon us at this time. Interestingly, Qom has another unique position. This particular position and this unique position of Qom is just a few decades old. The fact that it is the world's primary center of Islamic teaching, knowledge, and research across sects, all of them. But there is another quality that Qom has, which has been with Qom for almost 1400 years now. Very few people have paid attention to this aspect of Qom's history. Dear brothers and sisters, we have many cities today which are populated by the Shia. We have many parts of the world where the Shia live. Many cities where the majority of the population is Shia. You can name many of them in Iran and Iraq, for example, many cities. Qom is also one such city where almost everyone who lives there is Shia. But Qom has a certain history which makes it unique. Dear brothers and sisters, all the other cities today that are populated by the Shia, these are cities, settlements that were back in the past not populated by the Shia. That means that there was a time that when they were a part of the Muslim lands, they were a part of the Ummat, but they did not have the privilege of being Shia inhabited. Take the city of Baghdad. The majority of the population of Baghdad today is Shia, but there was a time when this was not the case. And the same goes for many, including The cities of Iran, the old historical cities like Isfahan and many others, there was a time when they were not Shia inhabited. But Qum has this privilege of being inhabited by the Shia right from the time when its people embraced Islam. Almost 1400 years ago. Almost 1400 years ago. And no other city can compare with Qum in this regard. And this is an important historical feature and privilege. Anyway, when we come back to Qum, this importance of staying focused on where we are getting our, when we do tawassul, staying focused on that. Let me narrate a small incident in this regard. This is about 40 years ago. There was an Arif by the name of Ayatollah Jafar Mujtahidi, and he used to hold these morning gatherings, these gatherings of morning just like this one. And in that gathering, he would not speak. He would invite another speaker by the name of Agha Burqai, a famous speaker of that time. They've all passed away. This is about 40 years ago. They've all passed away from this world. Agha Burqai used to come and recite majlis, and then after the majlis would be over, the gathering would sit down together, and with refreshments, Ayatollah Jafar Mujtahidi would speak about some matters of the soul. And in fact, many of the people who came to that majlis came essentially for this part, where he would talk about his own spiritual experiences and provide insights into aspects of the soul as an arif. And of course, Agha Burqai would sit down as well. But on one of these occasions, Agha Burqai, when he finished reciting the majlis, tried to leave immediately. He seemed to be in a hurry. Agha Mujtahidi asked him to sit down. He sat down for a few minutes, then once again got up and started to leave. Once again he asked him to sit down. When he did this for the third time, Agha Mujtahidi spoke to him sharply, rebuked him, and told him, sit down. That which you are seeking will come to you anyway. So he was stunned and he sat down. In some time, a young man came up to Ayatollah Mujtahidi and said, Ayatollah Mujtahidi, I have a car. I would like to give it to you. It would please me very much. Will you please accept this? Ayatollah Mujtahidi said that, take this key and give it to Burqai, who is sitting here. And he hands the key to Burqai and tells him that this is what you wanted, wasn't it? This is what you were seeking, wasn't it? Agha Burqai begins to cry. The people who observed this incident are still alive around us today. And while he's crying and the others are consoling him, he tells the people what has happened. He says that this is about 40 years ago. This was a time when the war between Iran and Iraq was still on, and things were materially very difficult in Iran at that time. Everything was rationed. He says, I was getting old. I needed a car. But cars were not freely available as well at that time because of difficulties. I had managed to find a relative in the concerned government department who could allot me a car out of turn. And he had told me, if you can come to me today by such and such time before the office closes, I will be able to do the required paperwork for you. And now I am so deeply ashamed that after spending an entire life recounting the karamat and the powers and the blessings of the Ahlul Bayt, when it came to seeking a car, I tried to do something out of line and out of turn. And I'm extremely grateful to Ayatollah Mujtahidi that he has corrected me in this regard. I forgot that whatever problems we have, whatever problems we may face, while we should continue our efforts, we should not for a moment forget that the real source of the solution lies in the household of the Prophet, lies with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is something that had slipped from my mind. Dear brothers and sisters, one of the problems that we are facing at this time in our lives is, of course, this matter of ensuring that our Husseini culture, ensuring that our Islamic, our Karbalai identity and culture is passed on to the following generations. It's one of the major problems that we are facing in our lives today. You don't meet any parent these days, and it's just not Singapore, in other countries as well, who isn't worried about this. He says, our kids, I'm so worried. We grew up in an environment which was far less challenging than what our kids are growing up in. And we had the benefit of a lot of tradition in our upbringing, and which allowed us to retain a sufficient semblance of our Husseini and our Muslim identity. But our kids today, be they little ones or be they the young people, we are worried. Their environment is far more challenging, and they do not have the benefit of the rich traditional environment that we grew up in. This is a problem that is mentioned everywhere. Dear brothers and sisters, it is a genuine problem. And I would like to add here, however, that it is a problem, it is a fear which is expressed mostly by parents, but I would like to say that it is a fear that is felt by the children as well. It is a fear that is felt by them as well. They're not able to express it in those terms. But young people, when you get close to them, when you get to know them, you feel the crisis that they themselves feel they are going through. They feel the pull of goodness. A part of them feels revulsion at sin and emptiness and materialism. They feel the pull of Hussein, of Karbala, of Islam on the one hand. They feel revulsion at the other things. But they also feel the pull of a lot of material pleasures. And they are concerned as well. Let us not for a moment feel that we are the only ones, the older generation, that is worried about this. Young people, once they cross a certain age, of course, if they're very young, of course, they don't realize these things. But young people, mostly when they enter their teenage years, are worried as well. But they're not able to say it the way older people are able to. They are worried about it. And one of the factors that worries them is that they see that which their parents are inviting them towards, some of it doesn't seem to make sense. It seems to be too emotional. It seems to be too culture specific. Doesn't seem to answer their questions and the doubts that they have. Doesn't seem to cater to their needs. And these are genuine problems that we need to address. There is no time to get into these, but inshallah, if time permits, we will touch upon them tomorrow. What we will close with tonight, inshallah, dear brothers and sisters, is that the Husseini culture, Karbala, offers us a solution to this problem and this crisis that is afflicting us. And it is a culture that needs to be adopted. And I would like to make it very clear that if somebody from my understands or assumes that my statement means that our kids should adopt this culture and therefore everything will be fine, I wish to just clarify that no, all of us need to adopt this culture better and more, and then everything will be fine. Let's not assume that everything is fine with us and the only problem is with our kids. The more we adopt this, we will find that we will obtain the answers to our intellectual questions that we have. We will find that emptiness that we feel in our lives begins to ebb away and is replaced with something substantial. We are able to build closer relationships. We are able to find meaning and purpose and direction in our lives, inshallah ta'ala. The grief itself in this maktab is of a unique nature and quality. Dear brothers and sisters, you are well aware that man, and by man I mean human beings, man dislikes grief and pain. All of us would like to avoid feeling pain, be it physical pain or emotional pain. And we go to great extent to avoid feeling pain, feeling grief. We dress in certain ways, go to certain places. We build our relationships in ways where we are not hurt by those that we have relationships with. We avoid people who may hurt us, right? And this is fairly natural. This is entirely natural, in fact. This is how we have been created. But there is something strange about the grief of Karbala. There is something strange. All other pain and grief, we find ourselves going to great extents to avoid it. But this grief and this pain of Karbala, we find ourselves going to great extent to avoid anything that could reduce this grief. When we find out that sin reduces the grief for Karbala, we feel in ourselves this urge to stop sinning. When we find out that illegitimate sources of income reduce our grief and pain for Karbala, we sense in ourselves an urge to have greater purity in our mal. Things seem to work entirely the other way around when it comes to this particular grief. Now, is this because human nature is somehow suspended when it comes to grief about Karbala? Human nature demands that all sorts of pain and grief should be avoided, and we naturally try to avoid it. But when it comes to Karbala, it's the other way around. Does this mean that the grief of Karbala is something beyond logic, beyond human nature? I don't think so, dear brothers and sisters. If we focus and pay attention to a point here, I think we will find that no, it makes perfect sense. This reversed order of things seems to make perfect sense. Dear brothers and sisters, let's pay attention to what happens to us when we are in pain, particularly grief. What happens? All of us have faced setbacks in our lives. All of us have lost a near and dear one, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevate all their stations and forgive them in the hereafter. How it happens when we are struck by the loss of a dear one? We want to stay silent. We want to sit in a corner. We don't feel like doing anything. We don't want to meet anybody. Isn't that how it usually happens? But what happens when we commemorate the grief of Karbala? We want to gather here. We want to meet each other. We want to talk about this person with everybody that we meet. Narrate incidents about Karbala, about Hussein, about his family. And when we get up from these gatherings after having shed our tears, we feel energized. We want to do something for Hussein. We want to do something for his movement. We want to find a way to take it forward. Dear brothers and sisters, it is not grief per se that human nature is repelled by. It is this lack of energy, this deathliness that accompanies most forms of grief that human nature is repelled by. But when there is a grief about which Rasulullah has said, Inna liqatl al-Husayn hararatan fi qulub al-mu'minin. On account of Husayn's death, there is a raging fire or a heat and warmth in the hearts of the mu'mineen. It's a different kind of grief. So it is not grief per se that we are repelled by, but it is the consequences of grief that cause either repulsion, revulsion, or attraction. And in the case of Hussein's grief, the effects are of the nature of a kind which attract us, dear brothers and sisters. Karbala occurred on the 10th of Muharram in the year 61 Hijri. But the preparations for Karbala began several decades prior to that. Several decades. We see several years, decades prior to Karbala, we see Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajal farajahum, addressing his brother Aqil and saying, "O Aqil, please go and look for a brave family. I want to marry a lady from a brave family, so that a son may be born to me who I can raise up, keep safe for a very difficult and challenging day." For a very difficult and challenging day. And this is how Imam Ali alayhi salam's marriage and wedding with Hazrat Ummul Baneen takes place, the mother of Hazrat Abbas ibn Ali. Abbas is brought up by Ali. When Abbas is a young man, narrations say that he was present in the Battle of Siffin, very, very important battle, about which occurred approximately 23 years or so prior to Karbala. He was a very young man at that time, very young. But he was taken along despite his young years to the Battle of Siffin, because he has to be trained, he has to be prepared, he has to play a very important role in Karbala. And what is the result of this training? What is the result of this training? The result of this training is, for example, obedience. When a few days prior to Ashura, there came a time when Yazid's forces, which had gathered across some distance away from Hussein's camp, when they said that we will no longer allow you to pitch tents next to the river Al-Qama, that small little branch of the Euphrates. You must take your tents further behind. Basically, this was the preliminary to cutting off access to water. When they said this, and they started to pull up the tent pegs aggressively, violently, a few days prior to Ashura, of course, Hussein's followers and soldiers were incensed. How dare you? This land doesn't belong to you. We came here first. And furthermore, according to certain traditions, Imam Hussein had bought that land from those who owned it. But even if that didn't happen, we came here first. And we pitched our tents first. And things were close to turning into a skirmish, a battle at that point in time. And some narrations say that Hazrat Abbas moved his hand to his sword. And at that time, Imam Hussein signaled him and said to him that, "No, Abbas, let's do whatever we are being asked to, because Hussein will not go down in history as the one who started the battle." And so the same hands who had reached for the sword were now themselves undoing these ropes and pulling up the tent pegs to take them behind. The obedience, trained for obedience of his Imam. If it's loyalty, he was trained for loyalty as well by Imam Ali. We can see that on the 9th of Muharram. On the 9th of Muharram, Hazrat Abbas is seated in the tent with his brother, with Imam Hussein. And they hear a voice from the door. The voice says, "I am Shimr ibn Ziljawshan. I am Shimr. Shimr was one of the leading commanders of the Yazidi army, particularly cruel and hard-hearted. I am Shimr. I would like to speak to my nephews. Nephews? Yes, dear brothers and sisters. Shimr, despite all his negative qualities, it so happened that he was related by blood to Hazrat Banin at some distance. They were distant relatives. And therefore, he viewed Hazrat Abbas and his brothers, because Hazrat Abbas had other brothers as well in Karbala, as his nephews. And he said, I would like to speak to my nephews. Hazrat Abbas did not reply. He understood. Shimr, when Shimr says nephews, he means Abbas. He did not reply. And Imam Hussain told him that, go and talk to him. Even though he is a vile sinner, fasiq, go and speak to him. See what he has to say. So Hazrat Abbas went to him and Shimr said, it is an ignominy for me. I will be ashamed if tomorrow, when all of you are massacred, my nephews are killed by my army as well. It will cause me some embarrassment. So I have brought this guarantee of safe passage, where I've written down your names, assuring you of your safety. You may take this letter and leave. No one will harass you. Look at the audacity of this man. And look at the loyalty of Hazrat Abbas, where he answers, "O you sinner, O you fool, you are offering me safe passage when no safe passage is offered to the grandson of Rasulullah, and you expect me to accept it?" Rejects it and sends Shimr back. And if you want to see all the qualities that he was trained for, that Hazrat Abbas was trained for by Imam Ali, let's come to the day of Ashura. It's the day of Ashura. Hazrat Abbas is the standard bearer, the flag bearer of the army. Dear brothers and sisters, in the earlier days, there used to be one person, when battle used to happen on battlefields, there used to be one person who was known as the flag bearer or standard. It was his job to hold the standard, the flag, aloft. Because when battle used to be joined and the two armies would clash, it was very difficult to communicate and keep in touch with soldiers of one army. Found it impossible to communicate freely with each other and find out whether what we need to do. Have we won? Is the battle over? Have we suffered a setback, defeat? Do we need to temporarily, tactically fall back and regroup? None of these things were easy to communicate. So there used to be this flag and standard that they used to keep their eyes fixed upon. And if the standard and flag kept flying, they knew that the battle was still on and we were still in the fight. And Hazrat Abbas was the flag bearer. Well, what a flag bearer. All that Abbas has been doing on the day of Ashura right from the morning is bringing the bodies of the martyrs from the battlefield and lining them up next to the tents. First the companions and then his own brothers and relatives. He keeps asking for permission. "Oh brother, let me go. Oh my Imam, let me go. Permit me to fight. I've been trained for this all my life." But Imam Hussain says, "No. Abbas, you are my flag bearer. How can I allow you to go and fight? The flag needs to keep flying so that the army knows that we are still in the fight." At one point, Abbas turns around and says, "Oh my dear brother, where is this army that I am the flag bearer of? All of them have been martyred. At least now allow me to go." Imam Hussain says, "All right, if you must go, you can hear the sounds of these children crying for water, screaming with thirst. If you must go, go and get water for them." Abbas picks up the water skin. In those days, there were these animal skins that were used for storing water. He picks up the water skin. He places the flag on his saddle and he heads off towards the river. Sakina and the children, they feel like they've come alive again. Water is going to come. My uncle Abbas has gone to get water. We are going to get water. It's just a matter of a few minutes. Abbas heads down towards the river. As you know, brothers and sisters, the rivers always flow in a slightly lower elevation. He heads down, and so these people perhaps are able to see his flag as it heads down towards the river. He heads towards the bank. Those who are guarding the bank, when they see Ali's son coming, they run helter-skelter. They're not able to give battle. They're struck by fear. He enters the river, come almost unchallenged. He rides his horse into the river and he plunges the water skin into the river. And as it is filling up with water, it is said that with his other hand, he picks up a cup of water in his palm. Abbas is thirsty. It's been 3 days since he has had any water. And water is now in his hand. He's looking at the water and he remembers the thirst of Sakina. He remembers the thirst of Zainab. He remembers the thirst of his hymn. And he pours the water back into the river. There are those who say that one of the tragedies of Hazrat Abbas is that he was not able to fight in Karbala and he was martyred without fighting. But no, brothers and sisters, this battle was perhaps bigger than any other battle that was fought in Karbala. He pours the water back, he fills the water skin, and he rises up out of the river, outside, back towards the tent. Dear brothers and sisters, the army, those soldiers, those enemy soldiers who had run away, they hadn't run very far. Even in deserts where the river flows, there are bushes, trees, greenery alongside the river. And so there were plenty of places to hide next to the river. And that's where they were hiding. And when Abbas comes out of the river with the water skin in his hand, they began to attack him from all sides. Somebody attacked from this side, some from the front, some from behind, left, right, everywhere. And Abbas is now fighting. And he's fighting not just for his life, he's fighting to bring water to Sakina. And he fights valiantly. But one hand is engaged holding the water skin. And therefore there comes a time when one of these soldiers manages to cut off Abbas's right hand. Brothers and sisters. Cut off his right hand. Abbas continues to fight, holding the water skin in his left hand. A few moments later, his left hand is hacked off as well. Abbas continues to fight, holding the water skin in his teeth. And while he's fighting, one of these soldiers strikes the water skin with an arrow, causing the water to spill over the sands. At this time, Abbas, it is said, turns his horse around. He no longer sees any point in going back towards the tent. He may not have any hands, but he turns around to face the enemy. And he approaches the enemy. And the enemy strikes him on the head with a mace, in his eye with an arrow. And Abbas falls down from his horse onto the sands of Karbala. Dear brothers and sisters, whenever somebody falls down from a horse, they do two things. They call their imam and they hold out their hands to cushion their fall. But my Abbas can only do one of these two things. He has no hands. He falls on the ground, calling his imam, please accept my last salam. The imam hears and rushes to Abbas's aid, wipes the blood from his eyes, holds his head in his lap as he passes away and is martyred. Then he picks up the flag and heads back towards his camp. As the flag is coming back, Sakina, the kids are rejuvenated. They are overjoyed. Yes, Abbas, my uncle, is finally coming with the water. He is coming. But when they see that the flag is in the hands of Imam Hussain, Sakina holds her head and says, dear uncle, please come back. I don't want any water. Please come back. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. العلي العظيم. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.